Imagine coming home early to surprise your wife of 22 years with your grandmother's priceless sapphire ring, a family heirloom passed down through 50 years of true love, only to find her in your bed with your best friend and business partner, the man who stood beside you at your wedding, your son's godfather, the guy you built your entire company with. But here's where it gets absolutely wild. Instead of apologizing, your wife looks at you with pure irritation and says, "You're home early. Get over it. He's better in bed anyway." Most men would have lost it right there. Most men would have burned everything down in rage. But Brandon Hayes, he did something far more devastating. He walked out in complete silence and systematically dismantled both their lives with the cold precision of a man who'd spent 2 decades solving impossible problems. 22 years of marriage deserved something meaningful. That's what Brandon Hayes kept telling himself as he drove home early, the velvet box pressing against his ribs like a promise. At 44, he'd built what most men only dreamed of: a thriving consulting firm, a beautiful home in Dallas, and a marriage he thought was unbreakable. The sapphire ring in his pocket wasn't just jewelry. It had belonged to his grandmother, worn for 50 years through joy and hardship. She'd passed it to him on her deathbed, tears streaming down her weathered face. "Give this to someone who deserves it," she'd whispered. "Someone who'll cherish it like your grandfather cherished me." Brandon had spent months having it reset, adding a new platinum band and a custom engraving. Miranda would love it. She'd always admired his grandmother's elegance, her grace under pressure. The ring symbolized everything their marriage had become: tested by time, strengthened through challenges, beautiful in its endurance. He'd closed a massive contract that afternoon. His business partner, Brett, had suggested celebrating with drinks, but Brandon declined. He wanted to surprise Miranda, maybe take her to that Italian restaurant she loved in Uptown, maybe tell her again how grateful he was that she'd taken a chance on him all those years ago at that charity gala. The house was quiet when he arrived. Too quiet. Miranda's car sat in the driveway, but he heard no music, no television. He set his briefcase by the door, called her name. Nothing. Then came the sounds from upstairs, muffled at first, then unmistakable. His hand trembled as he reached for the bedroom door. Part of him wanted to turn around, walk away, pretend he'd never come home early, but he couldn't. The door swung open. Miranda was in their bed with Brett Kingsley, his best friend of 20 years, his business partner, Owen's godfather, the man who'd stood beside them at their wedding, promising to support their marriage. They froze. Brett scrambled for clothes, stammering apologies, but Miranda just stared at Brandon with irritation, not shame, not guilt, irritation, like he'd interrupted something mundane. "You're home early," she said flatly, pulling up the sheet. Brandon couldn't speak. His throat closed. The velvet box in his pocket felt impossibly heavy. "It was just once," Miranda snapped. "Get over it." Brett found his voice. "Man, I'm sorry. I didn't mean—" "Shut up, Brett." Miranda cut him off. Then she looked at Brandon and smirked. Actually smirked. He's better in bed anyway. Brandon didn't yell, didn't throw anything. He simply nodded, turned around, and walked out. One moment he was standing in that doorway, the next he was behind the wheel of his car, gripping the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. 22 years. Gone in an instant. Brandon drove without destination, the streets of Dallas blurring past him. Traffic lights, storefronts, other cars, all meaningless. His mind kept replaying the scene. Miranda's smirk, Brett scrambling for his pants like a teenager, that cold dismissiveness in her voice. His phone buzzed incessantly in the cup holder. Miranda, Brett, Miranda again. He ignored them all. What could they possibly say that would matter now? Miranda had already made her position clear. She wasn't sorry. She was annoyed he'd discovered them. He pulled into a shopping center parking lot and sat there, engine running, staring at nothing. A woman walked past with a stroller, A couple emerged from a restaurant, laughing. Normal people living normal lives, unaware that someone's world had just collapsed nearby. His phone lit up with a text. Miranda, we need to talk. Come back home. Come back home, as if he'd done something wrong, as if he needed to explain himself. Another text from Brett. Man, I'm so sorry. I never meant for this to happen. Call me. Brandon deleted both without responding. Eventually, he started driving again. Muscle memory took him to East Dallas, to Eric's small house. Eric had been his friend since high school, one of the few people who wouldn't judge or try to fix everything before Brandon was ready. He knocked. Eric opened the door, took one look at Brandon's face, and stepped aside without a word. That's what real friends do. They know when to talk and when to just let you exist. Guest room's ready, Eric said quietly. I'll grab you a beer. Brandon walked into the simple room and sat on the bed. He pulled out the velvet box, set it on the nightstand. The sapphire caught the window light, shimmering like it didn't know it represented the most expensive reminder of his stupidity. Eric returned with 2 beers, handed one over, and sat in the chair across from Brandon. You don't have to talk about it, Brandon replied, his voice flat and distant. She was with Brett, in our bed. Eric didn't offer platitudes. He just nodded, drank his beer, and stayed. That night, Brandon didn't sleep. He stared at the ceiling, replaying every moment, every sign he'd missed, every lie he believed. When had it started? How long had they been laughing at him behind his back? By morning, the numbness had hardened into something else. Not rage, not yet, just cold, clear certainty. Everything was about to change, and this time, he'd control the narrative. He spent 2 decades building a business, managing crises, solving impossible problems. This was just another problem. Devastating, yes, but solvable. First things first, he needed to protect himself. Because if Miranda thought he'd simply fall apart, she was wrong. Morning light filtered through Eric's guest room blinds. Brandon had been awake for hours, his phone buzzing constantly since 6 a.m. Miranda, Brett, Miranda again. Every call went to voicemail. Whatever they had to say, he wasn't ready to hear it. Maybe never would be. Around 8, he showered and borrowed a clean shirt from Eric. In the kitchen, Eric handed him coffee, strong and bitter, exactly what he needed. Sleep at all? Eric asked. Not really. Eric nodded, didn't push. He understood. Brandon pulled out his laptop at the kitchen table. If Miranda and Brett expected him to collapse, they'd be disappointed. Crisis management was his specialty. Time to apply those skills to his own life. First, money. He logged into their joint bank account, his name as primary holder. He transferred half the balance, $43,000, into a new account Miranda couldn't access. The other half stayed. He wasn't trying to leave her destitute, just protecting himself. Next, passwords. Banking, credit cards, investment portfolios. Every account secured. Each confirmation felt like cutting another thread binding them together. Then he called the landlord. The lease was in Brandon's name only. Miranda's credit had been sketchy when they moved in years ago. He explained the situation professionally, kept emotion out of it. The landlord was understanding. 2 months ran for early termination. Brandon paid immediately. Utilities came next. Electric, water, gas, internet. All in his name. He scheduled disconnections for week's end. If Miranda wanted lights, she could handle it herself. She had a job. She had money. She'd manage. Credit cards were last. Miranda was an authorized user on his Visa in American Express. He called both banks, had her removed. She'd been using them for months. Groceries, shopping, spa days. Probably gifts for Brett, too. While on the phone, Brandon checked recent transactions. His stomach turned. Hotel charges from dates he'd been out of town. Expensive dinners at restaurants they'd never visited together. A jewelry purchase from 3 weeks ago he'd never received. By noon, he'd severed every financial tie. Each action felt like peeling off dead skin. He wasn't being petty. He was being smart. She'd betrayed him, destroyed their marriage. Now she'd face consequences. You're handling this better than I would, Eric observed from across the room. I'm not handling it. I'm surviving it. There's a difference. His phone buzzed. Owen, his son. Dad, where are you? Mom's freaking out. What's going on? Brandon's chest tightened. Owen didn't know yet, still at college, living a normal 18-year-old's life. Brandon didn't want to drag him into this mess. Not yet. But he wouldn't lie either. I'm fine. Staying with Uncle Eric for a few days. I'll call you soon. Focus on your classes. Owen responded immediately. Mom said you guys are fighting. She's really upset. What happened? Fighting. Like this was some minor disagreement that would blow over. Brandon stared at his phone, trying to find words to tell his son the truth. Before Brandon could respond to Owen, another text arrived from Miranda. You need to come home. We can fix this. Don't be dramatic. You're overreacting. Traumatic. Overreacting. The words made his blood boil. He'd walked in on her with his best friend, his business partner, the man who'd promised to support their marriage, and she thought he was overreacting? Another message followed. Think about Owen. Think about our family. Don't throw away everything we built over one mistake. One mistake? She kept using that phrase like it absolved everything, like 22 years of loyalty meant nothing against one afternoon of betrayal. Brandon turned off his phone and set it face down. He couldn't think clearly with her voice in his head. I need to go back to the house, he told Eric. Get my things before she does something stupid like change the locks. Eric grabbed his keys. Want me to come with you? Yeah, I don't trust myself to stay calm if she's there. They drove in silence. When they pulled into the driveway, Miranda's car was gone. Good. Brandon wasn't ready to face her yet. Inside, everything looked the same. Furniture they'd picked out together, photos on the walls, snapshots of a life that no longer existed. Their wedding photo hung above the fireplace, both smiling like they believed in forever. Brandon moved quickly upstairs. The bed was made, sheets changed, pillows fluffed. Like changing sheets could erase what happened. He packed clothes into a duffel bag, grabbed his laptop and charger, pulled important documents from his filing cabinet. Birth certificate, passport, tax returns, business contracts. Everything he'd need when this turned ugly. Then he went to the closet where he'd hidden the ring box months ago. The shoebox was there, pushed back under winter coats. He opened it. Empty. His stomach dropped. He searched frantically. Every box, every drawer, every shelf. Nothing. Then he saw it. A receipt on the closet floor, half hidden under Miranda's running shoes. A+ Pawn Shop, 2847 Commerce Street. 1 sapphire ring, platinum band, estate piece, $450. $450. That's what his grandmother's ring was worth to her. What 50 years of his grandparents' love was worth. What 22 years of marriage was worth. Brandon stood there, staring at the receipt, feeling something inside him harden further. This wasn't just betrayal, this was cruelty. She'd taken everything he valued and turned it into cash to fund her affair. He pocketed the receipt and finished packing. Before leaving, he grabbed a notepad from the kitchen and scrawled a message. Lease ends in 30 days. Utilities disconnected by Friday. You're on your own now. He left it by the coffee maker where she'd see it first thing tomorrow. As they drove away, Miranda's car was approaching from the opposite direction. Their eyes met briefly through windshields. Her face changed. Confusion, then realization, then panic. Good. Let her panic. Back at Eric's place, Brandon finally turned his phone on. The screen exploded with notifications. 38 missed calls, 52 texts, 10 voicemails. Most from Miranda, some from Brett, a few from numbers he didn't recognize. Probably her family trying to insert themselves into something that wasn't their business. He ignored the calls but read the texts. He needed to understand what story they were spinning. Miranda's messages started angry. Where are you? Answer your phone. This is ridiculous. Then shifted to panic. The bank accounts are frozen. You cut off the utilities. How am I supposed to pay rent? This is financial abuse. Financial abuse. Brandon actually laughed, a bitter sound. He'd spent 22 years providing for her, building their life, ensuring she never worried about money. Now that he'd stopped funding her lifestyle, he was abusing her. Then came desperation. "Brandon, please, we need to talk like adults. I made a mistake, but don't throw away 22 years. Think about Owen. Think about our family." Our family. Like she hadn't already destroyed it. Brett's messages were different, more calculated. "Man, I know you're hurting, but let's talk this through. We've been friends for 20 years. Don't let this destroy everything we built." Then more aggressive. "You're making a huge mistake. Think about the business. Think about our clients. Think about the 15 people who depend on us. Don't do something you'll regret." Just because he was angry, like anger was unreasonable when finding your wife and best friend together. Other messages surprised him. Miranda's sister Claire. "Brandon, I don't know what happened, but Miranda's a mess. Please call her. You guys can work it out." His mother-in-law, Patricia. "Brandon, dear, Miranda told me you had an argument. These things happen in marriage. Don't let pride get in the way of forgiveness." An argument. That's what Miranda was telling people. Not that she cheated, just that they'd argued. She was already controlling the narrative, playing the victim. Brandon needed proof. Not for himself, he'd seen enough, but for when this went public, when people took sides, when Miranda tried painting him as the villain. He needed documentation showing the truth. He opened his laptop and started compiling everything. Bank statements showing Miranda's excessive spending, credit card bills with hotel and restaurant charges, the pawn shop receipt for his grandmother's ring carefully photographed, screenshots of every text message, every piece of evidence establishing the timeline. Then he did what he'd been avoiding. He called a lawyer. Patricia Holt answered on the second ring. Her reputation in Dallas divorce cases was formidable. She listened without interrupting as Brandon explained everything, his voice steady despite the chaos inside him. "Mr. Hayes," she said when he finished, "I'm sorry this happened to you, but you've done exactly the right things. Document everything. Don't communicate with her except through me. And whatever you do, don't let emotion drive your decisions now. Emotion isn't the problem. Clarity is." The next morning brought an unexpected message. Lila Brooks, Miranda's college friend, someone Brandon had always liked for her straightforwardness and inability to tolerate nonsense. But she was Miranda's friend, not his. Seeing her name on his screen was surprising. "Brandon, I heard what happened. I think you should know something. Can we talk? It's important." He called immediately. She answered on the first ring. "Brandon," Lila said carefully, "I wasn't sure if I should reach out, but I couldn't stay silent anymore. Not after what Miranda's been telling people." "What is she saying?" Already knowing it wouldn't be truth. "That you overreacted to a misunderstanding. That you walked in on something that looked bad but wasn't what it seemed. That you've been distant for months and she thinks you're having a breakdown." Brandon's jaw tightened. "And you're calling to tell me you believe her?" "No," Lila said firmly. "I'm calling to tell you she's lying. Brandon, this wasn't a one-time thing. I've known for months." His grip tightened on the phone. "How long?" "At least 4 months that I know for certain, maybe longer. I saw them together at a restaurant in Fort Worth in February, holding hands across the table, kissing, acting like a couple. I confronted Miranda the next day. She broke down, admitted everything, begged me not to tell you. She said it was complicated, that she was confused, that she'd end it soon. 4 months minimum. Every late night at the office, every business trip she claimed Brett needed help with, every weekend she said she was meeting girlfriends for brunch. All lies. Every time Brandon kissed her goodbye in the morning, told her he loved her, she was already betraying him. "Why are you telling me now?" His voice rough. "Because you deserve to know the truth. And because Miranda called me yesterday trying to get me to vouch for her, to tell you it was just a one-time mistake, to help convince you to forgive her. I can't do that, Brandon. I won't lie for her about this." "Thank you," Brandon said quietly, "for being honest." "There's something else you need to know," Lila continued, her voice dropping. "Brett's married. His wife Emma is 7 months pregnant with their first child. I don't know if she knows about the affair, but she deserves to." Brandon's blood ran cold. He'd known Brett was married. He'd been best man at their wedding 5 years ago. But he hadn't thought about Emma in all this, hadn't considered she was another victim. And she was pregnant, carrying Brett's child while he destroyed their marriage. "I don't know if she knows," Brandon said. "But you're right, she should." "I have her number if you want it," Lila offered. He hesitated. Did he want to be the one to destroy Emma's world the way his had been destroyed? "Send it to me," he said finally. Brandon stared at Emma Kingsley's contact information for 20 minutes, trying to find the right words. How do you tell a pregnant woman her husband has been unfaithful? How do you deliver news that will shatter her world? Finally, he chose simple and direct. "Emma, this is Brandon Hayes, Brett's business partner. I'm sorry to reach out like this, but there's something you need to know. Brett has been having an affair with my wife, Miranda. I found them together in my home 3 days ago. I thought you deserved to know the truth. If you need proof or want to talk, I'm here." He hit send before second-guessing himself, then set the phone down and waited. His heart pounded. 3 minutes later, his phone buzzed. "I knew something was wrong," Emma wrote back. "He's been distant for months, working late all the time, taking calls in the other room. I kept telling myself I was being paranoid, that it was just work stress. Thank you for telling me. I need to see proof." Brandon sent everything. Screenshots of text messages from Miranda's iPad she'd forgotten to delete, credit card statements showing hotel charges and restaurant bills from dates he'd been out of town, photos of the pawn shop receipt for his grandmother's ring. Emma's response came 30 minutes later. "I'm 7 months pregnant with his child. 7 months, and he was doing this the entire time." Brandon's chest tightened. "I'm so sorry, Emma. You didn't deserve this. Neither of us did." "No, we didn't," she replied, "but they're not going to get away with it. I'm calling a lawyer tomorrow morning, and I'm going to make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of man Brett Kingsley really is." The next morning, Emma texted again. "I did something last night. I thought you should know." Brandon's stomach dropped. "What did you do?" "I went to the office. I have keys because Brett always loses his. I went through his desk, his computer, his files. Brandon, this affair has been going on for at least 6 months. I found emails, hotel reservations, everything. They've been using company credit cards to pay for their hotel rooms. That's embezzlement." 6 months, even longer than Lila thought. Every business trip, every late night, every time Brett claimed he was working on client proposals, he'd been with Miranda instead. "I took photos of everything, and I sent them to your company's board of directors this morning. Brett's been stealing from the business to fund his affair. That violates his fiduciary duty as a partner. They'll have to investigate." Brandon sat back, processing this. Emma had weaponized the corporate structure against them. If the board found evidence of embezzlement, Brett could be removed as partner. He could lose everything. "Thank you," Brandon typed back, "for doing what I should have thought to do. We're in this together now. They destroyed our families. Let's make sure they face real consequences." Brandon called his lawyer, Patricia Holt, and explained everything Emma had found. She was silent for a long moment. "Mr. Hayes," Patricia said finally, her voice sharp and professional, "if what Emma found is accurate, your wife and business partner have been committing fraud. This changes everything. We're not just talking about divorce anymore. We're talking about potential criminal charges." 2 days later, Richard Hoffman called, the chairman of their company's board of directors. Brandon had known Richard for 15 years, respected his judgment. His voice was grave. "Brandon, we need to talk about the allegations Emma Kingsley brought to our attention. The board has been reviewing the evidence she provided. I'm afraid it's worse than we thought." "How much worse?" "Brett has been using company credit cards to pay for hotel rooms, dinners, and travel for at least 8 months. We're talking about $73,000 in fraudulent charges. He's been billing them as client entertainment expenses, but we've contacted the clients he claimed to be entertaining. None of them were ever at those locations." $73,000. Brett had stolen that much from their company, from their employees, from the business they'd built together, just to fund his affair with Miranda. "There's more," Richard continued. "Miranda, as the company's financial controller, approved every single one of those fraudulent expense reports. She signed off on them, processed the reimbursements, never flagged them as suspicious. Either she was complicit in the theft or criminally negligent in her duties. Miranda hadn't just cheated on him. She'd helped Brett steal from their company, helped him cover his tracks, helped him destroy everything they'd worked for. "What happens now?" Brandon asked. "The board is meeting tomorrow morning. We're going to vote on whether to terminate Brett's partnership and refer the matter to law enforcement. We're also going to terminate Miranda's employment effective immediately. I'm sorry, Brandon. I know this is your wife, but we can't ignore theft on this scale." "She's not my wife anymore," Brandon said quietly. "Do what needs to be done." That afternoon, Owen called. "Dad, what's going on? Mom called crying. She said she lost her job. She said you're trying to destroy her. Is that true?" Brandon closed his eyes, took a deep breath. It was time his son knew the truth. "Owen, I need to tell you something, and it's going to be hard to hear." "Dad, you're scaring me." "Your mother had an affair with Brett. I found them together 3 days ago. I walked in on them in our bedroom. That's why I left. That's why I cut off financial support. And now we've discovered that Brett has been stealing from the company, and your mother helped him cover it up." Silence. Then Owen took a shaky breath. "Uncle Brett? My godfather?" "Yes, and Mom knew. She helped him." Another long silence. "I need time to process this, Dad, but I believe you." The board meeting happened on Thursday morning. Brandon wasn't invited to attend, which was probably for the best. He would have said things he couldn't take back, done things that wouldn't help anyone. Instead, he sat in Eric's living room, waiting for the call that would tell him their decision. Richard Hoffman called at 11:30. His voice was somber, but firm. "Brandon, the board has voted unanimously to terminate Brett Kingsley's partnership effective immediately. He's been removed from all company accounts, stripped of his access credentials, and escorted from the building. We're also referring the matter to the district attorney's office for potential criminal prosecution." Brandon let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. "What about Miranda?" "Her employment was terminated this morning. We've also filed a civil lawsuit against both of them to recover the stolen funds. Our lawyers believe we have a strong case." "Thank you, Richard, for handling this the right way. You built this company, Brandon. You and your integrity. We're not going to let two people destroy what you've worked so hard to create." That afternoon, Brandon met with Patricia Holt in her downtown Dallas office. She had news. "Miranda's attorney contacted me this morning. She wants to negotiate a settlement. She's offering to sign the divorce papers without contesting anything if you agree not to press criminal charges." "No," Brandon said immediately. "She doesn't get to buy her way out of this." Patricia nodded like she'd expected that answer. "I thought you'd say that. Here's what I recommend. We proceed with the divorce. We let the company pursue its civil case, and we let the district attorney decide whether to file criminal charges. You focus on rebuilding your life." "What about the ring? My grandmother's ring?" Patricia pulled out another document. "I've already contacted the pawn shop. They still have it. The redemption period hasn't expired yet. I can have someone pick it up today if you want." "Yes, I want it back." 2 days later, Brandon sat in that same pawn shop holding his grandmother's sapphire ring in his hand. The jeweler had cleaned it, and it sparkled under fluorescent lights like it hadn't been betrayed and sold for $450. "You're lucky," the clerk said. "Another week and it would have been sold." Lucky. Brandon almost laughed. But as he walked out of that pawn shop with the ring safely in his pocket, he realized maybe he was lucky. Lucky to have found out when he did. Lucky to have friends like Eric who gave him a place to stay without questions. Lucky to have a son who believed in him. Lucky to have escaped a marriage built on lies. That night, Emma Kingsley called. "I wanted you to know, Brett came by today to get his things. He tried to apologize, tried to explain. I told him the only thing I wanted was divorce and child support. He's not going to be part of this baby's life." The district attorney's office moved faster than Brandon expected. Within 2 weeks, formal charges were filed against Brett Kingsley: embezzlement, fraud, theft from an employer. Each count carried potential prison time. Miranda wasn't charged criminally, but the civil lawsuit loomed. The company was seeking full restitution of the $73,000 plus damages. Her lawyer called Patricia Holt daily, trying to negotiate a settlement. "She's desperate," Patricia told Brandon over coffee one morning. "Her attorney keeps emphasizing that she's a first-time offender, that she was under Brett's influence, that she's willing to pay back everything over time. They want to avoid a trial." "What do you recommend?" Brandon asked. "Honestly, let the company handle the civil case. Your focus should be on the divorce. The prenuptial agreement you signed 22 years ago is ironclad. She walked into the marriage with almost nothing, and given her infidelity, she'll walk out with almost nothing. No alimony, no claim to business assets, no share of your retirement accounts." "What about Owen? Child support?" Miranda shook her head. "He's 18 and in college. No child support. You've already set aside money for his education, which is protected. She has no claim to that either." The divorce proceedings moved forward with surprising speed. Miranda's attorney clearly advised her that fighting would only make things worse. She signed every document presented to her, agreed to every term, made no demands. Brandon received regular updates from Emma about Brett's situation. The preliminary hearing had been scheduled. Brett's lawyer was trying to work out a plea deal, but the district attorney wasn't budging. They wanted to make an example of him. "His lawyer called me," Emma said during one of their phone conversations. "They developed an unexpected friendship through this ordeal, two people bound by shared betrayal. Wanted to know if I'd testify on Brett's behalf, talk about what a good person he is, how this was out of character." "What did he say?" "I told him to never contact me again, that the man I married doesn't exist, and I won't lie for a stranger." Emma had given birth 6 weeks ago to a healthy baby girl. She'd named her Sophie. Brandon had sent flowers to the hospital with a card, "Congratulations, you're going to be an amazing mother." Owen came home from Texas A&M that weekend. They sat in Eric's living room, and Owen talked about his classes, his friends, his plans for the future. He didn't mention Miranda. Brandon didn't push. "Have you thought about what happens next, after the divorce is final?" "I'm looking at apartments, something in Uptown, close to the office. Start fresh." Owen nodded. "Can I help you move when the time comes?" "I'd like that." "Dad," Owen's voice was quieter now, "I'm proud of you for how you've handled this, for not just falling apart. Some days I wanted to, still do sometimes, but you didn't. That's what matters." 4 months after that terrible afternoon, Brandon stood in the empty living room of his new apartment in Uptown Dallas. It was smaller than the house he'd shared with Miranda, but it was his. Every piece of furniture, every dish, every towel had been chosen by him for him. No compromises, no shared decisions. Just his space, his rules, his life. Owen came by that afternoon to help unpack the last boxes. He'd been staying weekends, coming home from Texas A&M whenever he could. Their relationship had grown stronger in unexpected ways. The divorce had hurt him, Brandon knew that, but it had also shown him that sometimes the strongest thing you can do is walk away from people who don't value you. "Dad, where do you want this?" Owen asked, holding up a framed photo from his high school graduation. "On the bookshelf, right in the center." Owen placed it carefully, then stepped back to look. "Have you heard from Mom lately?" "No, have you?" "She calls sometimes, tries to explain, tries to justify what she did. I don't really want to hear it. I told her I needed space." "That's fair. You don't owe her forgiveness just because she's your mother." The divorce had been finalized 2 weeks ago. Miranda had signed the papers without contesting anything, probably because her lawyer told her she had no case. She'd walked away with almost nothing. The prenup had protected Brandon, and her infidelity had voided any claim she might have had. Brett had fared even worse. The district attorney had proceeded with criminal charges. He was facing up to 5 years in prison. His trial was scheduled for next month. Emma had filed for divorce and sole custody of Sophie, who was now 2 months old and thriving. The business was flourishing without them. Brandon had brought in a new partner. someone he'd known professionally for years but never worked with closely. They were landing new clients, expanding into Houston and San Antonio, building something even stronger than before. His phone buzzed. A text from Eric. "Dinner tonight? There's someone I want you to meet." Brandon smiled. Eric had been not so subtly trying to set him up with various women for the past month. Brandon wasn't ready yet. Not really. But he appreciated the effort. "Sure," he typed back, but no promises. He looked around his new apartment, at the life he was building from scratch. It wasn't the life he'd planned. It wasn't the future he'd imagined when he designed that sapphire ring for Miranda. But it was his. It was honest. It was good. Owen put his hand on his shoulder. "You okay, Dad?" "Yeah," Brandon said, meaning it. "I'm okay." He'd learned something important over the past 4 months. Betrayal doesn't have to destroy you. It can reveal who you really are, what you're really made of. And sometimes losing everything is the first step to finding yourself. Brett Kingsley's trial began on a cold Tuesday morning in November. Brandon sat in the courtroom gallery, watching his former best friend sit at the defendant's table in an ill-fitting suit, looking 10 years older than he had 6 months ago. The prosecution was methodical and brutal. They presented bank statements, hotel receipts, expense reports, every piece of evidence documenting 8 months of theft. $73,000 stolen from the company. $73,000 spent on hotel rooms, expensive dinners, weekend getaways with Miranda. Emma testified on the second day. 7 months postpartum, she walked to the witness stand with quiet dignity, carrying herself like someone who'd been broken and rebuilt stronger. She wore a simple navy dress and looked directly at Brett when the prosecutor asked her questions. "Mrs. Kingsley, did you know about your husband's affair?" "No, not until Brandon Hayes told me." "How did you learn about the financial crimes?" "I went to his office. I found evidence he'd been using company funds to pay for hotel rooms and travel with his mistress." Brett's lawyer tried to discredit her during cross-examination, suggesting she'd been motivated by revenge. Emma remained calm. "I was motivated by truth," she said simply. "My husband was stealing. Someone needed to stop him." Miranda wasn't called to testify. She'd negotiated immunity in exchange for cooperation, providing documentation of every fraudulent expense report she'd approved. The district attorney had been clear: testify truthfully or face charges yourself. Brandon watched her enter the courthouse on day 3, avoiding eye contact with everyone. She looked smaller somehow, diminished. Whatever confidence she'd once possessed had evaporated under the weight of consequences. The defense tried to paint Brett as a man suffering a midlife crisis, someone who made terrible decisions but didn't deserve prison. They called character witnesses, former clients, college friends, his elderly mother who wept on the stand. But the evidence was overwhelming. The jury deliberated for only 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. Brett's face crumbled when the verdict was read. His lawyer put a hand on his shoulder. His mother sobbed in the gallery. Emma sat stone-faced, holding Brandon's hand for support. Sentencing came 2 weeks later. The judge was a woman in her 60s who'd built her career prosecuting white-collar crime. She listened to Brett's tearful apology, his lawyer's plea for leniency, his mother's desperate testimony about his good character. Then she spoke. "Mr. Kingsley, you stole from your business partner, from your employees, from people who trusted you. You used that money to fund an extramarital affair, showing callous disregard for both your wife and the victim's wife. This wasn't a momentary lapse in judgment. This was sustained, calculated theft over 8 months. You betrayed everyone who believed in you." She sentenced him to 3 years in federal prison, followed by 5 years probation, full restitution of $73,000 plus damages. Brett was led away in handcuffs. He looked back once at his mother, at Emma, at the courtroom gallery. His eyes found Brandon's for just a moment. Brandon felt nothing. No satisfaction, no vindication, no closure. Just emptiness where friendship used to be. Outside, Emma hugged him tightly. "Thank you for being here," she said.
"We made it through," Brandon replied. "Yes," she said. "We did."
6 months after the trial, Brandon sat in a coffee shop in the Arts District, reviewing contracts for a new client. The business was thriving beyond his expectations. Without Brett's chaos and Miranda's interference, revenue had increased by 30%. He'd hired 3 new consultants and opened an office in Houston. "Excuse me, is this seat taken?" Brandon looked up. A woman stood beside his table, holding a coffee cup and a laptop bag. She had dark hair pulled into a loose ponytail, intelligent brown eyes, and a warm smile that seemed genuine rather than practiced. "It's all yours," Brandon said, gesturing to the empty chair across from him. "Thanks, this place gets crowded fast." She settled in, opened her laptop, and started working. They sat in comfortable silence for 20 minutes. Brandon finished reviewing his contracts and was about to pack up when she spoke again. "You look familiar. Have we met before?" Brandon studied her face. She did look familiar, but he couldn't place where. "I don't think so. I'm Brandon Hayes." Her eyes widened slightly. "Brandon Hayes? From Hayes Consulting?" "That's me." She smiled. "We were on opposite sides of the Henderson merger 2 years ago. I'm Rachel Chen, corporate attorney with Morrison & Associates. You absolutely destroyed my client's negotiating position with your market analysis." Brandon laughed despite himself. "The Henderson merger. I remember that case. Your client was trying to hide declining revenue behind creative accounting." "They were," Rachel admitted. "I actually respected how thoroughly you'd done your homework. My client didn't appreciate it, but I did. That was good work." "Thanks. Your legal strategy wasn't bad either. You almost salvaged an unsalvageable position." They fell into easy conversation about work, the Dallas business community, changes in the consulting industry. Rachel was sharp, funny, and refreshingly direct. She didn't flirt or play games. She just talked like a normal person having a normal conversation. "I should let you get back to work," Brandon said eventually, glancing at his watch. "Actually, I'm done for the day," Rachel said. "I was just catching up on emails. Are you hungry? There's a great Thai place 2 blocks from here." Brandon hesitated. He hadn't been on anything resembling a date since Miranda. The thought felt strange, disloyal somehow, even though he had no reason to feel that way. Rachel seemed to sense his hesitation. "Just dinner between 2 professionals," she said easily. "No pressure, no expectations, just good food and conversation." "Okay," Brandon heard himself say. "That sounds nice." The Thai restaurant was small and crowded, with mismatched chairs and walls covered in photos of Bangkok. They ordered pad Thai and green curry, shared spring rolls, and talked about everything except their personal lives. It was only when they were finishing dinner that Rachel mentioned it casually. "I heard about what happened with your wife and business partner. I'm sorry, that must have been devastating." Brandon tensed, waiting for the usual platitudes or uncomfortable sympathy. But Rachel just said, "My ex-husband cheated on me with my sister 3 years ago, so I get it. The betrayal, the anger, the feeling like you'll never trust anyone again." Brandon looked at her, really looked at her, and saw understanding in her eyes. Not pity, understanding. "Does it get easier?" he asked. "Yes," Rachel said simply. "It really does." Brandon and Rachel started meeting regularly for coffee, then dinners, then weekend walks around White Rock Lake. It wasn't dating exactly, more like 2 people who understood each other's damage, finding comfort in shared experience. 3 months into their friendship, Rachel invited him to a gallery opening in Deep Ellum. Brandon almost declined. Art galleries had always been Miranda's thing, not his, but something made him say yes. The gallery was small, showcasing local artists. Rachel moved through the space with genuine appreciation, stopping to study paintings and sculptures, reading every description card. Brandon found himself watching her more than the art. "You're smiling," she observed, catching him staring. "Am I?" "You are. It's nice. You should do it more often." They stopped in front of a large abstract painting, swirls of blue and silver that somehow captured both chaos and peace. The title card read, "After the Storm." "I like this one," Brandon said. "Why?" He studied it for a moment. "Because it shows that something beautiful can come after destruction, that chaos doesn't have to be the end of the story." Rachel slipped her hand into his. It felt natural, easy. Right. Brandon, she said softly, I think I'm ready to stop being just friends, if you are. He looked at her, really looked at her. Miranda wasn't Miranda. She was honest, straightforward, emotionally available. She'd been through her own betrayal and come out stronger. She understood what it meant to rebuild. I think I am too, he said. That night, Brandon went home to his apartment and pulled out the velvet box containing his grandmother's sapphire ring. He'd kept it in his desk drawer, unable to look at it for months. The ring that was supposed to symbolize 22 years of marriage. The ring Miranda had pawned for $450. He held it up to the light, watching it sparkle. His grandmother had worn it for 50 years, through good times and bad. She told him to give it to someone who deserved it, someone who would cherish it. Miranda hadn't deserved it. But that didn't mean the ring was cursed or ruined. It was just a ring, a beautiful piece of jewelry with a history that predated Miranda's betrayal. The next morning, Brandon called Owen. Dad, everything okay? Everything's fine. I wanted to tell you something. I've been seeing someone. Her name is Rachel. It's still early, but I wanted you to know. Silence on the other end. Then, are you happy? I think I'm starting to be, yes. Then I'm glad, Dad. You deserve to be happy. There's something else. Grandmother's ring, the sapphire. I got it back from the pawn shop. I want you to have it. Dad, that's your ring, shouldn't you? No, Brandon interrupted gently. It's a family ring. It should stay in the family. When you find someone you want to spend your life with, someone who really deserves it, it'll be there for you. Owen's voice was thick with emotion. Thank you, Dad. That means a lot. After hanging up, Brandon felt lighter somehow. The ring had represented his failure, his blindness, his misplaced trust, but now it would represent something else. Continuity, hope, the possibility that his son would choose better than he had. Some things were worth holding on to. Others needed to be let go. Brandon was finally learning the difference. 1 year after that terrible afternoon, Brandon stood on the rooftop terrace of his office building, watching the Dallas skyline turn gold in the sunset. The company anniversary party hummed with conversation and laughter below. Hayes Consulting had doubled in size, opened offices in 3 cities, and landed contracts with Fortune 500 companies. Rachel joined him at the railing, handing him a glass of champagne. Hiding from your own party? She asked with a smile. Just taking a moment. A year ago today, my life fell apart. Now I'm standing here with you, watching the sunset, feeling genuinely happy. It's surreal. You rebuilt everything, Rachel said. The business, your relationship with Owen, yourself. That takes incredible strength. I had help. He squeezed her hand. I couldn't have done it without Eric, without Emma, without you. Inside, Owen was laughing with the new consultants, comfortable and confident. He'd graduated from Texas A&M in May and was spending the summer interning at the company before starting law school in the fall. He'd grown into a remarkable young man, thoughtful, principled, resilient. Emma had moved to Austin 6 months ago with Sophie, starting fresh in a new city. She'd opened her own graphic design business and was thriving. She and Brandon still talked monthly, bound by shared experience and mutual respect. She'd sent a congratulatory email that morning. We survived, we rebuilt, we won. Brett was 8 months into his prison sentence. Brandon didn't think about him much anymore. The anger had faded, replaced by indifference. Brett had made his choices and faced his consequences. That chapter was closed. Miranda had moved to San Antonio, working as a bookkeeper for a small accounting firm. She'd paid back $20,000 of what she owed the company, with the rest scheduled in monthly installments over the next 5 years. Owen saw her occasionally, maintaining minimal contact. Brandon never asked for details. Her life was no longer his concern. I got something for you, Rachel said, pulling a small box from her purse, for your 1-year anniversary of new beginnings. Brandon opened it. Inside was a simple silver compass pendant on a leather cord. I know it's not your style, Rachel said quickly, but I saw it and thought of you. You lost your way for a while, but you found your direction again. You became your own compass. Brandon felt his throat tighten. He pulled her close, kissing her forehead. It's perfect, thank you. They stood there as the sun disappeared behind the skyline, painting the sky in shades of purple and pink. Below, the party continued. Friends, employees, clients, all celebrating success built on honesty and hard work. Brandon thought about his grandmother's ring, now safely with Owen for his future. He thought about the journey from devastation to renewal, from betrayal to trust, from loss to love. A year ago, he'd driven home early with a velvet box in his pocket, planning to celebrate 22 years of marriage. He'd found betrayal instead. That discovery had destroyed his life as he knew it. But destruction, he'd learned, wasn't always the end. Sometimes it was the beginning. Sometimes you had to lose everything to discover what you were really made of. Sometimes the worst day of your life was the first step toward becoming the person you were always meant to be. Brandon smiled, squeezed Rachel's hand, and walked back into the light and noise of his new life, the life he'd built from ashes, the life he'd earned through resilience and courage, the life that was finally, authentically his. The sapphire ring story had ended, but Brandon Hayes' story was just beginning.
18 months after his divorce was finalized, Brandon stood on the beach in Galveston watching Rachel walk along the shoreline collecting shells. The Gulf breeze caught her hair and she laughed at something a passing child said. In that moment, Brandon knew with absolute certainty what he wanted. That evening, back at their hotel, Brandon pulled out a small velvet box, not the one that had held his grandmother's sapphire ring. That belonged to Owen now, waiting for his future. This was different. A ring he'd chosen himself, for the woman who'd helped him remember what real partnership looked like. "Rachel," he said, his voice steady despite his racing heart, "I spent 22 years in a marriage built on lies and compromise. I thought that was what marriage was supposed to be. Two people tolerating each other's flaws, settling for good enough, pretending everything was fine when it wasn't." Rachel set down her wine glass, her eyes widening as she realized what was happening. "Then I met you," Brandon continued, "and you showed me what it actually means to be with someone who sees you completely and loves you anyway. Someone who challenges you to be better, not someone who makes you feel small. Someone who chooses you every single day, not out of obligation, but because they genuinely want to." He opened the box. Inside was a platinum band with 3 small diamonds arranged simply, elegantly. Nothing like the elaborate sapphire he'd once planned to give Miranda. This was honest, straightforward, real. "Rachel Chen, will you marry me?" She was crying now, nodding before she could even speak. Yes, God, yes. Brandon slipped the ring onto her finger, and she kissed him with a fierceness that took his breath away. "I need to tell you something," Rachel said when they finally pulled apart. "I was so scared when we started dating, scared that you weren't really over Miranda, that I was a rebound, that you'd wake up one day and realize you'd made another mistake." "You're not a mistake," Brandon said firmly. "You're the best decision I've ever made. I know that now, because you've never hidden who you are. You've been honest about your pain, your healing, your fears. That's real intimacy, Brandon. Not pretending everything's perfect, actually being real with each other." They spent the rest of the evening on the hotel balcony, planning a future that felt nothing like Brandon's past. A small wedding, just close friends and family. Owen would walk Rachel down the aisle since her father had passed years ago. Emma would bring Sophie. Eric would be best man. As the moon rose over the Gulf, Brandon thought about the journey that had brought him here. The devastation, the betrayal, the slow, painful rebuilding, the moment he'd discovered he was stronger than he'd ever imagined. He'd lost everything and gained himself, and now he was choosing to share that self with someone who truly deserved it. The sapphire ring story had ended in a pawn shop, but Brandon's story, it was just reaching its best chapter yet, the one where he finally got it right. 5 years later, Brandon stood in the kitchen of the home he shared with Rachel, making coffee on a Sunday morning. Through the window, he could see their daughter Emma, named after the friend who'd stood beside him in his darkest hour, playing in the backyard. She was 3 years old, fearless and joyful,
completely unaware of the pain that had preceded her arrival. Rachel appeared in the doorway, still in her pajamas, smiling at the domestic scene. They'd been married for 4 years now, and every morning Brandon woke up grateful. Not in the performative way he'd once claimed gratitude in his first marriage, but genuinely, deeply thankful for a partnership built on truth. His phone buzzed, a text from Owen. "Dad, can you and Rachel come over tonight? I need to talk to you both about something important." Brandon smiled. He knew what this was about. He'd seen the way Owen looked at Grace, his girlfriend of 2 years. He'd noticed Owen asking questions about marriage, about knowing when someone was the one, about not repeating his parents' mistakes. That evening, they gathered in Owen's apartment. Grace was there, nervous and excited. Owen cleared his throat, took Grace's hand, and said the words Brandon had been expecting. "We're getting married. I proposed last night." She said yes. Rachel squealed and hugged them both. Brandon shook Owen's hand, then pulled his son into a tight embrace. "I'm so happy for you," Brandon said, meaning every word. "She's wonderful, Owen. You chose well." Later, after Grace and Rachel had retreated to the kitchen to look at wedding inspiration on Pinterest, Owen pulled Brandon aside. "Dad, I want to ask you something. The sapphire ring, grandmother's ring, you gave it to me years ago. I've been keeping it safe, waiting for the right moment. Grace and I were talking, and I want to give it to her, but only if you're sure. I know it has complicated history." Brandon thought about that ring. The 50 years his grandparents had worn it with love and devotion. The day he'd planned to give it to Miranda, only to discover her betrayal. The pawn shop receipt for $450. The moment he'd reclaimed it, cleaned it, and passed it to his son. "Owen," Brandon said carefully, "that ring survived 5 decades of real love with your great-grandparents. Then it survived betrayal and redemption. It's been tested, just like we've all been tested. The ring isn't cursed. It's resilient, just like our family." He put his hand on Owen's shoulder. "Your grandmother told me to give it to someone who deserves it, someone who'll cherish it. You found that person. Grace deserves it. Give her the ring with my blessing and your great-grandparents' legacy." Owen's eyes filled with tears. "Thanks, Dad, for everything. For showing me what real strength looks like. For teaching me that betrayal doesn't have to define you." Brandon looked around the apartment, at his son who'd grown into an incredible man, at Rachel laughing with Grace in the kitchen, at the life he'd rebuilt from ashes. The sapphire ring would get its happy ending after all, and so would he.